Right, welcome back everyone. This is our second podcast. Thanks for all the good feedback we got on the first one. I think we both got quite a few messages, didn't we, Ben? Which was good.
We did, yeah. We got a huge amount of feedback, really positive stuff. Brought people up from our network from a long time ago as well. So, really appreciate it. So, for those of you who are here for the first one, I'm Ben Wheeler. I'm Chief Technical Officer at Firemind.
Yeah, and I'm Dan White. I'm CCO, Chief Commercial Officer, so responsible for sales, marketing, and the AWS Alliance. And we've got another guest with us today who's sat in the room because we were on our own last time, weren't we? So
we were, yeah.
We have Jody here. So Jody's our digital marketing assistant and podcast operator. Yeah, welcome aboard, Jody. So we thought what we'd do today is start off with a bit more personal information about me and Ben so you can get to know us a little bit better. So Ben, I obviously know your likes and dislikes. Tell the audience what you're into when you're not working.
Okay, yeah. So I was thinking about this on the train down here, and I would usually start this off by saying I'm into triathlon. And about 3 weeks before I joined Firemind, I completed my first, and probably last Ironman triathlon event. But then the life of a CTO, you don't really have as much time as you'd like to train. So since then, I haven't done as much training, but I'm still very much into it. I still enjoy triathlon. I'm also, I guess my guilty pleasures are cars. Dan, you've been in a car with me a few times, and obviously slightly different interests in cars, me and you. But I think I was working out. I think I've been driving 25 years, and I've owned 27 cars. So that gives you an indication of how bored I get, how quickly with vehicles, and I tend to change them out. But I guess they're my key interests. And for anyone who ever joins me on webcam, I've got a little bit of a guilty pleasure around Lego as well. I didn't really have much when I was a kid, and now I can afford a bit. And I had 3 daughters, which none of them are really into Lego that much. So I have to do it myself. So I've got quite a few Lego models. What about you? What are you into?
Yes, I used to do triathlon when I was younger and fitter. So I think the last one I did was 2010, and I did a half Ironman. So I'm half the man that you are. Some people said it's a tin man, but I did a half Ironman called the Retrieval back in 2010. But I decided I didn't have enough time to do the training. So for me now, I do a bit of running, bit of swimming, bit of calisthenics. I think that's the right thing for it. So keeping myself in shape. I don't really understand cars, so I can't say what kind of car I've got, but it's not that good. It's leaking in the footwell as well. There's some weird thing going on with it. So we are looking for a new car, and you're helping me, right, to try and find something. So I've got no idea at all. The other thing for me is music. So I like composing music. What else do I like to do? Similar to you, it's been such a crazy 6 months here that having the time to do stuff has been quite hard. Spending time with the family as much as possible when I'm working so hard. So prioritising that as well. Car wise, looking for any tips on. I just want to get a lease car. So
I'm sure people will jump in with top tips.
Yeah, and I remember driving with you actually, and speeding like a mate. Do you remember that time you were showing me the acceleration on your?
I was well within the speed limits.
For public purposes.
The acceleration was a bit something you weren't used to, wasn't it?
Yeah, the acceleration scared me a little bit. And driving wise, I went to, when I was younger, I did quite a bit of speeding, which is obviously you don't condone that. And I went to a speed awareness course, and I'm a born again sensible driver now, and that was 15 years ago. Need some advice on cars, definitely.
I'm sure people get in. And just want to touch on the point about swimming, because obviously I've done a lot of swimming as well, but your swimming isn't just usual in the pool swimming, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I forgot to say that. Yeah, so cold water swimming. So when it came to lockdown, there was no access to my swimming pool. So I started swimming in a local river in Winchester, River Itchen, and got very hooked on the whole cold water experience. So now we go every Saturday with a group of people, and it gets down in the winter to about 5 degrees C, so that really gives you the intense shivers. So now I've got a bit obsessed with it as well, and I've bought one of these cold water pods. So I go in there and just sit in there for 10 minutes, and it has an incredible experience. It just, the shiver that you get as all the blood drains out of your body kind of thing, it is incredible, because then you get in a nice hot bath and all the blood rushes back into your blood vessels, and it is highly recommend it.
I experimented with it for a bit.
Yeah.
So I live on the coast, and there's a group of my friends, and they still do it now. They call it dipping.
Yeah.
And they go down to the seafront and they walk into the sea, similar to what you do. Sea gets down sub 10 degrees, and it's the same cold water therapy. And I tried it a few times, and it was a bit too intense for me, I think.
Yeah. Once you get used to it, it is incredible. I mean, you never get used to that temperature. Your body still has a shock effect, but apparently it stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system. It improves your immunity, and it is definitely working for me. But
I should definitely give it a go. Do you remember that time we went to Helsinki with work, and there was there was a sauna, and you'd go into the sauna, and then after you'd finished in the sauna, you'd walk out, go straight outside and into a freezing lake.
Yes.
And then you dip into the freezing lake to close your pores or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was pretty intense.
Never did it those days.
No, too cold back then.
Yeah, there's a guy at AWS called Tom Lazowski. He was the first person I heard talking about it before he's the famous Dutch guy. Forgotten his name now. But Tom Lazowski is the one that sort of broadcast it to me. I think he's still doing it. If you're out there, Tom. Right. Okay. So that's a little bit about us. So you know something about us now. I thought we'd start off, Ben, with what's been happening since the last podcast. It feels like it was ages ago we did it, didn't it? Because so much has been going on. I've just come back from a little holiday in Portrush, off the north coast, so I got that cold water swimming in there. But I was just looking at my notes to see all the different events we've been doing and all the things we've been doing. We've been to New York, so meeting some of the local teams there in New York. We've also had an insurance event called TinTech, which went really, really well. Spoke to loads of great customers there. Ahmed went to the Global Partner Summit, where he met all the AWS leadership as well in Seattle. We've had the Media and Entertainment Symposium. We've had the Amazon Ad Tech Summit, where Ahmed spoke again. We've had Andy George was speaking at the Media and Entertainment event. Me and you did a C-level roundtable, a virtual roundtable with lots of VPs of different pretty big customers, right?
Yep.
And I also did a talk for diversity and inclusion in AI as well, which was really good. We'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah. But maybe we should start with that C-level roundtable, because that's quite current, some of the things that we were hearing. So did you want to talk a little bit about some of the main themes of that session? Yeah,
so the two main things that came out of that for me were, one was accuracy. So and I guess accuracy is an interesting topic we can get into, but accuracy was top of mind for these VPs, and can AI and generative AI specifically give me accuracy? And secondly, how can we mitigate against bias? How can we ensure diversity inclusion? And how can we make sure that hallucinations are mitigated as much as possible? So that was really interesting. I guess from an accuracy perspective, a lot of what we talk about is, and again, I think we're being generative AI is so top of mind. Everyone thinks, oh, Firemind, generative AI, but actually the importance, and we talked a bit about this last time, of getting the data right. Yeah. But not only the data, but the prompt engineering. So just the tiniest of nuance when you're asking an LLM something within the prompt makes a massive difference to the output. So while I think that using RAG for things like context is super important, unless you know how to ask the right question. For example, asking if they're to give choices can give choices across lots of different, whether it's male or female or non-binary. But then if you ask specifically his, it will give you just male options. So just that tiny little nuance of context and the way you ask the question can really change the output of the large language model. So that really drives the accuracy. Yeah.
And in terms of the context then, so what techniques are you seeing a lot in delivery? Are you seeing RAG used?
So I think most of what we're seeing is using RAG, just inferring over the contextual data that you give the model. Yeah. But we are starting to see a few instances now where really fine-tuning or small amounts of fine-tuning is required. And we're starting to experiment with that with customers. So as we know, a large language model is trained on huge sets of data across, drawn in from the internet a lot of the times. and some customer use cases where they're particularly nuanced, you really need to just fine tune that model just a little bit to give it not just the additional context, but change its way of thinking slightly. So we're starting to experiment with that a little bit. I still think most of the use cases won't need fine tuning because it can be quite expensive to do that.
So as I understand it, my way of simplifying RAG, so that's retrieval augmented generation, is if, for example, you think about generative AI, your large language model, as that either that 5-year-old or that smart graduate, I'm kind of thinking that is in a library, and they've got this vast library. So imagine a big public library, and what they've got to do is they've got to search that entire library to find the answer to the question you're asking of them. So think about that smart graduate. They're a bit naive. They haven't got all the background, but they know they're very good at searching things. They're very smart. So with RAG, what you're doing effectively is you're saying to that person in the library, I'm going to give you more context here. So if you've got to, for example, find out the latest information about Lewis Hamilton, is he changing teams, moving to another team? Rather than just say, go and search the whole library, you can say, I'm going to help you a little bit here. So I'm going to tell you, you should be looking in the sports section. You should be using this particular F1 publication to help you. So you're basically saying to them, here's a few things that will help you find the right information. I guess other things you could think about is in a library, you would say, go look in the sports section, go look in the motor racing section in that library, use these common websites to help you. And then what we're seeing in practice, if you turn that into to the real world, what we're seeing is we create a knowledge base, and then we upload information from different websites, we upload different documents, and that points the model in the right direction. So I think, is that kind of how you understand it for RAG?
That's pretty much as I understand. It's a great explanation actually of the way to get it across. And again, I think what's really interesting about the RAG approach, and this is where the importance of the data comes in, is you're inferring over a set of data that we're giving it, which is a point-in-time set of data. Lewis Hamilton example, if he decides to leave and join a different team, unless you've got that, that current contextual information in there, it will just infer over the data that it already has. So it's really important, again, with RAG, it's an evolution. You constantly have to give it the new context, the new data as things are changing in that specific area.
So then if you think fine-tuning is the fact that you're actually training that model on new data. So you're actually going through a training process, so it's more intensive, and it then customizes that model for a specific industry. So as I understand it, things like healthcare, you can have a specific healthcare solution that's trained on that specific healthcare information, and that's more intensive effort, but it seems to be the trend that we're seeing.
I mean, like with RAG, if you or any kind of model where you're giving or any kind of situation where you're giving the model the context, if you change that data, the model will give you different answers because there's now new context. Whereas fine tuning is permanently changing that model and giving it new data and new information for it to be able to use to then infer over that data again. So it's that permanent change with fine tuning. So Dan, tell us a little bit about the event that you went to recently. I think you were a male ally in a Women in Tech event. You were telling me a lot of what they were talking about was mitigating against biases that we know are really prevalent out there. You and I had we were bar raisers in AWS. Obviously, that teaches you against unconscious bias. So what kind of came out of that event, and what were the sort of things that you were talking about?
Yeah, it was a really brilliant event, and thanks to Sandra Joost and Beth O'Dwyer for involving me in that. Ironically, Laura Potter, head of delivery, was due to speak there, but she's been so busy with everything that's happening that I stepped in, and I learned so much at AWS about these topics, becoming a male ally, discrimination, and bias in the workplace as well. But this was in the context of generative AI. And we talked a lot about the fact that all of these LLMs are trained on the data from the internet, which is unfortunately naturally pretty biased. So we talked about techniques that you can use from an organizational perspective. You can basically ensure that your organization, from the leadership all the way down through all the different levels, has that awareness of bias in the workplace, of thinking about the data and looking at that data critically evaluating the data and saying, okay, is this fair? Is this a fair reflection of society? But also, is it a fair reflection of what we want to see? So, for example, if you think about motorsport, there isn't a great representation of female talent and diverse backgrounds. So it may be representing the actuality of what's out there, but we want to portray a better picture to inspire people. So we talked about the fact that the data is already quite biased, but also we want to portray things that inspire more people. So that was from an organisational perspective, but I guess from your point of view, what are you seeing on a technical perspective in terms of managing the bias in the projects that we're running?
Yeah, so I know we have talked a lot about prompt engineering. I think using the prompt engineering is how you mitigate a lot of that. How you ask the question, the syntax of the question, but almost more importantly, we talk with customers from the very beginning of our engagements with them about the importance of human in the loop in generative AI. We're not the experts in the specific domains that we're working with the customers. We have we have good levels of understanding, but in very specific use cases, generating articles or content or doing summarization of huge financial documents. We don't know what good looks like a lot of the time, and the output really needs that human in the loop. And I think that the really important point you made about diversity and inclusion is make sure you have humans evaluating that from those different diverse backgrounds, to make sure that the outputs are what you want them to be and what what you're expecting to see on the outside. If you've just got the same people reviewing the outputs, some bias is going to slip through, unfortunately. So you need to make sure that the human in the loop has that DEI aspect as well. Yeah, so guardrails allows you to put a wrapper around your application to prevent things like maybe a banker offering independent financial advice, making sure it's unbiased, factual advice, rather than any kind of contextual information that could impact your decision making and things like that. So I don't think we've implemented guardrails yet, but we're definitely looking for how we can do that and how we can wrap around to kind of add to the value of the applications.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to Khalil, one of our data scientists, before this event to get some more advice as well, and he said that probably this was preceding guardrails, that they do some custom API calls. So they have this layer, I'm not technical enough to know, but they have a layer in between the API and the customer application, and they can automatically block certain content that goes back to the customer as well. But the other interesting thing, and this probably came up in that C-level roundtable, is sometimes expectations from customers are maybe because of all the hype that the AI's Gen AI particularly is going to solve all these problems, and all the data is going to be perfect, and all the answers are going to be perfect, and it's going to do everything for you. I don't know about you, but I see that quite a bit sometimes where we have to set expectations. Have you seen that as well?
Well, it's one of two things. It's either this is not going to be able to do what we want, and the skeptics out there are kind of adamant that it can't do what we need it to do. And then there's the other end of it, which is customers are saying we need 100% accuracy. How do we get the model to give us that? And what's really interesting, the pace of innovation at the minute with the large language model providers is incredible. We're having to think about we create a point in time set of value for a customer, and actually in a month's time, when the next version of Claude gets released or one of the other models iterates, it can change the output dramatically. So we need to think about some form of LLM ops where we're constantly evaluating the customer and their application and iterating by testing the new language models as they come out. It's going to be a constant evolution over the next few months for customers, even the ones where we've just here's a production value, they're working with it, maybe they hit 95% accuracy. Can we strive further forward than that with the latest models? So
that's a great point actually about LLM ops, because we're seeing people dip their toes in the water, but as this grows into production use cases, that's especially where the management of the model from development, test, and into production is so critical, right? And we've got 50 projects right now we can pass on a lot of that automation and process to customers as well. So
yeah, exactly. And Anthony Hayes, who's heads up our managed service practice. And by the way, Jody, maybe you can put up a link to the video of Anthony getting his gold jacket. He just achieved the golden jacket, which is all AWS certifications. So there's a great video on our socials now with Anthony getting that gold jacket. But yeah, we're starting to think about how we can implement very specifically generative AI mechanisms into our managed services so that we're constantly iterating for our customers.
Yeah. Right. I think that's everything we wanted to cover.
Yep.
So thanks for your time, Ben. What time did we get up this morning? I got up at 5 a.m. to get here for this early morning recording.
Yeah, about 5:30. But
nice.
Well worth it.
Well worth it, yeah.
We're obviously find us on LinkedIn for those folks who don't know much about Firemind. Also, other notable social platforms. You can listen to the podcast on all good podcast providers, Spotify, iTunes. Podbean, yep,
and more.
So yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Jody, for moderating and keeping us honest.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, we look forward to seeing you on the next one.